Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone, to our April 26th webinar.
27.
Or 20, okay, or 28, well, 27, 28, depending on when you're listening. Our virtual club is going to present the CSW62 update featuring NFBPWC President Liz Benham. And we are very happy to have her here tonight with us. And Liz, thank you very much for agreeing to be our speaker tonight.
Okay, you're very welcome, Sue, and thank you everybody for inviting me. And I do apologize that on my presentation it does say April 27th. My brain is completely messed up these days with all kinds of dates and events and deadlines and so on. And when I did this, I guess the 27th was on my brain, and I didn't carefully check the calendar, so I do apologize for that. It is actually April 26th today, and it is 7:30. Okay, so I'm here to let you know about CSW62, and hopefully I'll just do one quick check here. Can everybody hear me okay?
We're good.
Yes. Okay, yes. Good. So the recording should be good. Okay, so I always like to go back to the beginnings. And the beginnings, BPW International particularly, has a very, very long history with CSW. In fact, BPW and one of our founders and old gems is Esther Heimer was instrumental in getting the Commission on Status of Women through the United Nations. So if you can click on the second slide. That would be good. So, you know, it was after the League of Nations was formed that Esther Heimer decided that there was a huge value in having non-governmental organizations have their input into the member states of the United Nations. And so then they decided to create the Commission on Status of Women, which we call CSW. And, of course, this now is the 62nd CSW that we've just had. But it was important to know that this was really a platform to promote women's rights in the political, economic, civil, and social and educational fields. And they felt the commission would be dedicated exclusively to gender equality and the advancement of women. And that was because of the hard work of Esther Heimer, who got together with influential people and pushed and prodded and said, we women really need to have this platform within the UN so we can promote women's issues and we can promote gender equality. And so at the 50th anniversary of the Commission's work in 1997, the then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said in his address, the Commission has been a catalyst for women's equality. It has played a crucial role in monitoring progress, in the advancement of women, and in holding governments accountable for their actions. It is a place where all women have a voice in shaping the policies of the international policy. And so you can just see the value that CSW has brought all these years from civil society, from NGOs, into the member states in the UN and into the policymakers of these countries. So Esther Heimer, the picture on this in this is actually in the book A Bus to 42nd Street, and that picture is Esther Heimer in 1998 when she was 100 years old, and we gave her a book there that's dated 1898. So that's when she was born. So we gave her the book, and that's me in the background with my curly hair, Claire Fulcher, who has since passed on, and Helen Swank, who was the other United Nations representative. So I have actually been a UN rep since 1998. I just actually gave up my badge. I'm giving up my badge. I will no longer be representing BPW International as a United Nations representative. But this was a really big deal when Esther Heimer was honored at the UN on her 100th birthday. And, of course, she passed when she was 103. So we have a great legacy from her. All of her documents, if you've all been to New York and to the Church Center, which is across the street from the United Nations, all of her documents are in a library there in the Church Center. And she's got all of the things that she has had done since she first began her career in this advocacy world, which was pretty significant. Okay, so the next slide, please. So the 62nd session of the Commission on Status of Women was held from the 12th to the 23rd of March in 2018. It's always been designated the first 2 weeks of March. And so representatives of member states, of course, you know that there's 193 countries or member states that belong to the UN. And then we also have all the ECOSOC. It has to be the economic and socially accredited non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that come from all regions of the world to attend the session. And so this really it provides this great platform where we have the work that goes on in the Commission, and all that work goes into shaping some of the global policy frameworks on women's empowerment and gender equality. And so, of course, the other thing that's pretty important about this is that you all know about the biggest women's conference in the world, which was held in Beijing. And out of Beijing came the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995. And it's now coming up for almost 25 years review in 2020. Now, all of the governments there in Beijing committed to the Beijing Platform for Action, and there were 12 critical areas of concern where they were to work on that and keep reporting. And so every 5 years, we've had Beijing Platform for Action +5, +10, +15, and we've had the 15, we've had the 20, and now we're coming up to the 25 review in 2020. So that's going to mark a really big event as well. And something that we keep the governments accountable to, because it's the NGOs that keep the governments accountable to those documents. Now, the Beijing Platform for Action, the 12 critical areas of concern are still there. You can read them. That's for another webinar. But many of the countries are supposed to dial into that and to report on what their success has been in gaining, you know, the changes that came out of those, the Platform for Action. Okay, so the next slide. So CSW62, next one. So this year, 4,300 civil society representatives from 130 countries participated in this CSW62. That is a big deal. And so the first 2 weeks of March in New York is a total zoo. With people coming in everywhere, and our hotel rooms are pretty booked. And so BPW has always had very big representation there, and our members come from all over the world to participate. And of course, we've always put the Leaders Summit, 2 days of Leaders Summit prior to the start of CSW for them to gain really some additional benefits out of being in New York. And so everybody comes and shares rooms, and everything in CSW is free. There's no cost for it. There are thousands of side events, all held in different places around the city, because the UN now is not big enough to hold these 5,000 approximate people that come in, and there's not enough place for workshops and so on. So it's held in many, many places, these side events that all participate on the theme. So the priority theme, of course, this year was challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of rural women and girls. So, and it was also reviewing another theme from a previous CSW, but this one really focused on rural women and girls. So next slide, please. So the side events, of course, as I said, was out. It's all very organized. In fact, our main representative in New York, Susan Malley, chairs the NGO CSW New York, and the NGO CSW New York is, for clarification, a substantive committee of Congo. And as you may or may not know, I just finished serving 6 years on the board of Congo, which is the conference of all NGOs within the UN system, not the country Congo, but the conference of all NGOs within the UN system. And it encompasses all 4 of the UN headquarters, which is in New York, Geneva, which is human rights, Vienna, which is mainly trafficking and nuclear weapons and those kinds of things, drugs. And then there is Paris, which deals mostly with the heritage sites around the world, more environmental heritage sites. And so those are the four that are the main headquarters of the UN system. So these side events are coordinated by NGO CSW New York, which is a substantive committee of Congo. And Susan O'Malley, who is the chair of NGO CSW New York, of course, is key in making sure that all these side events and things are organized well in advance and all the activities are put on for the NGOs. So they do a tremendous job. It's a huge, huge thing. And of course, everybody is involved in the discussions and the deliberations on the title and the framework and the policies that's going to come out of it that's going to be presented to the member states. So, and some of the permanent missions, you know, all of the countries have permanent missions around the UN. We've had many functions at the permanent missions. We certainly hold our Equal Pay Day, have been since 2009 when I implemented and launched the International Pay Day campaign in our organization. It's been hosted every year by the German mission, which is just almost across the street from the UN. And so every year we've had our Equal Pay Day side events there at the German mission. So all these missions sometimes open up and allow NGOs to meet in their facilities. And of course, there's also meetings that are held on the UN premises, but those require a special badge. And that is why every year BPW International chooses what we call our D20, 20 delegates who will then have the highest level of security badges to go into the UN and to participate in some of those high-level discussions. Now, that doesn't come freely. Of course, there is a price to pay for that, not in money, but in terms of work. So the D20 delegates have to meet every morning prior to going off to all of these events. They have to have briefings. And when they go to these conferences within the UN, they come back and have to report on them to the Vice President of the UN, which at the moment is Catherine Bossart. So they do participate and have that extra benefit, but there is work that's involved, and they do have the obligation and the responsibility to come back and report on all of that. Now, on this slide on the bottom, you will see all the highlighted days. Every day you could click on one of those days and find out all of the side events that are going on. Of course, there are way too many here for us to talk about, but in this presentation that you get, if you so wish, you can click on that and you can go to the link. That link will take you to all of the side events that were held on those days. Okay, so the next slide, please. Okay, then in addition to that, we also have regional caucus meetings where the regions of the UN or the NGO regions get together and discuss, of course, the theme and some of all of the deliberations that are going on. And those regions are divided into Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia and the Pacific, Europe and North America actually together. And then they have Arab and MENA, which is the Middle Eastern countries of North Africa, and you also have Africa. And so they all have their meetings on top of this, where they bring together some inputs that are going on from the collaboration with all the side events and all the NGOs and so on. The regions can then, get their own document ready on what they believe should go in as well into the final deliberations. So next slide. Okay, so the outcomes. So of course you have to have all these deliberations, but the most important thing is to find out what the outcome of all this is going to be. 2 weeks of all these meetings and discussions and deliberations and so on. There has to be something that comes out of it that is that could be used as policy. So the principal output of this Commission on the Status of Women is the agreed conclusions on the priority themes set for each year. So these agreed conclusions, which finally come out at the end, contain an analysis of the priority theme and a set of concrete recommendations for governments, intergovernmental bodies, and other institutions, civil society actors, and other relevant stakeholders to be implemented at the international, national, regional, and local level. And in addition to the agreed conclusion, the Commission also adopts a number of resolutions on a range of the issues. So we can give you that outcome document for you to read as we go on further on now. If you go to the next slide. So the agreed conclusions, usually probably within about 2 weeks after the Commission, 2 or 3, I can't remember exactly how long, but fairly shortly after, they come out with the advanced unedited version. And this, of course, is the outcome of this agreed conclusion was the Commission on Status of Women adopted agreed conclusions on the challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of rural women and girls. So here's the link to the full document of the agreed conclusions. And if you click on the next slide, there were some wonderful closing remarks on this 62nd session of the Status of Women by the Undersecretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, Phumzile Mhlamba-Ngonku. She's from South Africa, and she has been the Executive Director of UN Women, and she's the Undersecretary General of the Commission on Status of Women and the UN. So I will just read to you what she spoke at this meeting, at the closing remarks. She said, these agreed conclusions focus on addressing the poverty of women and girls in rural areas, the important issue of access, ownership, and control of land and other productive resources, opportunities, and challenges in agriculture, including their food, security, and nutrition. And they also recognize that the lives of women in rural areas are not only confined to food production and agriculture. They address the impact of climate change and the need for infrastructure such as ICT, energy, transport, drinking water, and sanitation. So that was a pretty powerful statement that she made. And then in conclusion, as we work to ensure that we leave no one behind, the theme that we have discussed this year is probably one of the most important because women who live in rural areas are at higher risk of being left behind. Our ability to address the needs of women and girls who are living in rural areas is the biggest contribution we can make to ensure the Sustainable Development Goals are achieved in the best possible way for the majority of humanity. So it was a pretty powerful thing. So I'd like you to switch over now to the next slide, and I just have to make sure I get some background noise turned off here. Okay, so the last paragraph in the agreed conclusions, and again, this is a tremendous document. It's 19 pages long, so obviously we can't deal with that here. But the last paragraph, which is always, this paragraph is actually permanent because it was also in the last CSW61. But it's important because this really calls to attention exactly what's going on here. So it reads that the Commission calls upon UN Women to continue to play a central role in promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and in supporting governments and national women's machineries upon their request, in coordinating the United Nations system, and in mobilizing civil society, the private sector, employers, organizations, and trade unions, and other relevant stakeholders at all levels in support of the full, effective, and accelerated implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and the gender-responsive implementation of the 2030 Agenda towards women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work. So this statement is pretty much set in concrete with the CSW. If you go back and look at CSW61, you will see the same statement at the end of the agreed conclusions of the CSW. And it's really a good read if you want to go in and read it. I mean, it covers all the aspects of the discussions that went on in how to empower rural women who obviously have a very bad life most of the time. It's a very hard life, and they have no access to many, many things. So then I would ask you to go to the next slide, because what's important here to know is that, of course, everything now with the United Nations is dialed into the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and all of the member states of the UN system have agreed to get this done by 2030. Now, we are at 2018, so you can understand it is only a few years left for them to achieve this. Now, prior to the Sustainable Development Goals, we had the Millennium Development Goals, which were called the MDGs. And unfortunately, the MDGs that took 15 years for them to have achieved them, they never did achieve them. So, of course, they all went to work, and all these conferences were held in Brazil. They had massive, big UN conferences where everybody got together then, and they came up with the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is called the 2030 Agenda, and there's a lot there, but pretty much most of the governments have dialed into this, and actually it's interesting that some of the governments and also corporates, because not only is governments into this, but also corporates through the United Nations. We also have the corporate side, which was developed, and they've all dialed into it, and they've all chosen a few of these, not all, because I don't think anybody can do them all, but they've chosen what they feel they can work on in trying to improve either the whatever's going on in their countries, but also in their corporations. And so, I mean, I think you are all familiar already with the Sustainable Development Goals, but particularly for us as a women's organization, you know, we are, of course, can dial into every one of these. I mean, they all pertain to women. Number 1 is no poverty. Number 2 is zero hunger. Number 3 is good health and well-being. Number 4 is quality education. Number 5 is gender equality. Number 6 is clean water and sanitation. Number 7 is affordable and clean energy. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. Number 9 is, I can't even read it here, my eyes are so tired. Let's see here, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. It's not one that I usually work on. So that's number 9. Number 10 is reduced inequalities. Number 11 is sustainable, need an extra light here, sustainable cities and communities. Number 12 is the responsible consumption and production. Number 13 is climate action. Number 14 is life below water, in other words, protection of all life below water. Number 15 is life on land. That's basically environmental as well. And number 16 is peace, justice, and strong institutions. And number 17 is partnerships for the goals. So really our organizations, women's organizations, practically work on continuously on number 4, quality education, number 5, gender equality, and number 8, decent work and economic growth, because All of those things dial into our initiatives on Equal Pay Day. And so we also, of course, have our environment committees who work on clean water. We've got water people doing all the climate things. We've got a lot of our members who are very, very keen on in the environment. And of course, we have others who work on peace and justice and strong institutions and partnerships for the goals. And we are partnered, of course, with quite a few international organizations to really to just be able to accomplish more. Because together when you partner, you are so much stronger. And so that sort of concludes it. I can open it up for some questions now, but at the bottom, and this little slide is available to all of you. And I think we've been putting it on the website and in the emails and so on into the e-news. But I think what is important to hear here is that it's to educate, empower, and enable. The 3 E's: advocating for human rights and gender equality. So that's what we're all about, and everything can be tied together. I will make one quick plug before I open it up for questions, and that is that at our General Assembly, which we're having in July, and which is combined now with our regional meeting for North America and the Caribbean, there will be 18 countries represented there. Our region, of course, is Canada, the United States, and the countries of the Caribbean, which include Bermuda, Barbados, St. Kitts, St. Martin, Dominica, Caymans, blah, 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 a few more of the Caribbeans, which I can't remember quite offhand. But they're coming, very excited to meet all of their North American sisters. And the program that we put together is really going to be fabulous. We have a 3-hour Leaders Summit, which is mandated from our Cairo Congress, that at every regional conference there has to be a Leaders Summit, and there has to be a BusinessNet workshop, which I have chaired for many years. So because we are a business and professional women's organization, we need to bring business into our organization for those small and medium enterprises, because women have all of those small, medium enterprises. We're not big businesses, we're not multinational businesses, but we certainly drive the economy with our SMEs, our small and medium enterprises. So we've got a great slate of workshops, the Leaders Summit. There's going to be a workshop on health. We are going to do a focus on the heart of a woman, because it was brought to my attention, and I was just absolutely horrified to see the statistics of 30 to 1 women die of heart attacks versus 1 from breast cancer. They're all bad, but 30 to 1 is really almost an unacceptable statistic, and yet most of these go undiagnosed, and that's why when women die, they die right then. There is no chance of healing or recovering. It's just death right then when they have a heart attack, because their symptoms were so masked and weren't diagnosed. And so we have to pay attention to this, because we are a women's organization, and this is really a critical health issue. So we're going to have some speakers on Heart of a Woman, talking about all of the gender inequities in heart attacks, because men have very different symptoms than women do. And we're going to have some diplomats who have come to talk from the UN to talk from their perspective of the UN, CEDAW. So there's just a huge combination of wonderful workshops that will be there to benefit everybody who comes. And so it's going to be a great conference. We already have 100 people registered, so and more are coming still. All of the international board are going to be there, the president, the 2 vice presidents, the finance director, the regional coordinator of Europe's coming, the young BPW from Nepal is coming, our own regional coordinator from USA, Bessie Hieronymus, will be there. And we have the regional coordinator from Africa, from Sudan, is coming, Abla. So, I mean, this is a chance to really get a real cultural infusion. If you have never been to an international congress before, this you're going to really get a lot out of. So I would highly recommend that if you haven't considered it, take a weekend, invest in yourself, come on down and really take another look at your organization from this perspective. So with that, I will then say I conclude that and open up for some questions.
Hey, Liz, this is Carol. I have 3 questions, okay?
Yes.
Let me do them one at a time. Can you give me an idea of what the cost will be for the international convention in general, like if you include the hotel and registration?
So currently, if you haven't already registered, the early bird is $350. That is for our General Assembly starting on Friday, because we need all of our affiliates to be there. You are the voice of our organization. We're going to be having amendments to our bylaws. We're having elections because we have a new national board coming. And we also have to take care of our initiatives and platforms that we have to work on for the next term. So we start on Friday afternoon, which then would include lunch, a reception. You have a lunch on Saturday, a hospitality, a reception on Saturday night. On Sunday, there's lunch and coffee breaks all through, and the gala dinner on Sunday night, which is going to be a beautiful event with a candle lighting ceremony, awards, and speeches, of course, by the international president. And our installation ceremony is going to happen at that time too. So the $350 covers all that, and if you are still interested, we could probably make a plan to do that, but otherwise you have to pay, I think, $20 more for registering now. The hotel is $189 for 2 people per night, and that includes a huge breakfast. It is a complete breakfast in a beautiful restaurant. With everything you want to eat. If you have a big breakfast like that, you won't want to eat any lunch, I can assure you. But so it includes a good breakfast. So that's $189 for 2 people, $169 for 1 person. And you can stay Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night, 3 nights. So basically, if you want to do 200, that's a night. That's 600 plus. So it's going to cost you about $1,000, depending on your airfare that you're going to get. But there are good airfares for around $300. Coming from most of the cities. So for about $1,000 to $1,200, you can really make a tremendous investment in yourself and just finally see what an international conference looks like. Does that answer it enough for you?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Now, my other 2 questions are in regards to what you talked about. One is the Beijing Conference, and I remember that well. Not that I went, but I remember being in BPW and talking about it. When we hit 25 years, will there be another large conference somewhere? Do you know?
Well, I'll tell you what, that has been deliberated for a long time. I remember when they tried to do Beijing Plus 15, a couple of NGOs decided we need to have a big conference to really build on Beijing Plus 15. It kind of fizzled out. And the reason that it fizzled out was because there was a lot of concern that if we had another conference, that the original platform for action would be at risk, because the governments would want to debate it. And then that original platform for action with 12 critical areas of concern, which included poverty, equity, equality for women, and so on. And I can't remember all of them, but they are really important. It covered women and girls. And so all of the NGOs had really considered that very carefully and decided it was too risky, because governments are known for doing this, going back on their words, not sticking to it. So they felt we've got to hold them accountable. They all were accountable. And so what we do is we just have the 2025 year, and all they do is raise the awareness about what is the status, what has been done, as promised by the member states and governments. So no, I mean, they will probably have a big focus on it, but they won't make a brand new conference unless some thoughts have changed on that. But I really very much doubt it, because this will be 25 years after.
Yeah, this will be 25 years in what, 2019 or
2020? 2020 it will be 25 years. Yeah, because it was 1995.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, because I don't know about the rest of the world. I mean, I do know what I hear, but the United States is far from meeting, a lot of these goals, in my opinion, as far as how women are treated. So, while you can, and I'm not arguing with you, of course, but while you can say that, you don't want to lose what they formed and said they would do, I don't know if they're really being held accountable, whereas, I remember how those conferences were so far apart in time. When they finally did the Beijing Conference, I think it had been quite a while since they did the one before that. And I don't know. It seems like time to me, especially 2020. There's something about 2020.
Here's the issue. Yes, the United States is way down on the lists when it comes to comparison with other countries on the status of women in this country. If you've all watched the movie Equal Means Equal by Kamala Lopez, you will really get an insight, a very raw insight into actually the status of women in the United States today, which is not good.
No, it's so disturbing.
I can only say that is why we need a national federation of business and professional women that has a strong voice, that can join and partner with other women's organizations to get the job done. Let's look at the Women's March. That has created a huge movement where, hopefully there will be some change. Although we're not a political organization, we're not nonpartisan. But, I don't really mind which party you're from, but every party women's issues cross every party line.
Right.
Whether you're Republican or Democrat or Independent or whatever, women's issues cross all party lines, and that has been our history since day one, that we will fight for women's issues. We have won in a lot of ways. If you look at all of our history, it's a really powerful and rich history already of the things that we accomplished as BPW. But we can only do it with a strong voice. We can't do it as a club, a local club. It's just not possible. And so that is why I am so passionate that this National Federation of Business and Professional Women has to move forward to be the voice, that strong voice for all of our members. But that means, too, our members have a responsibility. If you're keen and if you're passionate about these issues that we talk about, you have to bring your voice to the table, and you have to work with us to make sure that everything we're doing is being implemented in a way that can push us forward to accomplish some of those things.
Yeah,
and we can only do it together. We have to do it together because there's no other way that we can accomplish it. And I think, sadly, in the United States, women are not coming together enough. I don't know why we are not. We should be standing together like a wall of soldiers constantly, to push forward and get it done. Now, the Me Too movement has got a lot of traction, but also not sure how long that's going to last. There has to be sustainability in that. And we've got I appointed Jackie Melvin. You've had her on your webinar as the chair of sexual harassment against women in the workplace. And we're going to continue with that because certainly we, as an organization of almost 100 years, have got certainly the expertise to be talking about what happens to women in the workplace. All of our members can be experts at this. So I think we have a strong voice to add to that platform. But that's just on one issue, and there are many of them. So we really have to think about this. We as women have to finally stand up and say, look, we can only do this together, because apart and going in different ways in this, it ain't going to work. So let's get stronger together and let's get the job done. We should be number one in the world. Why aren't we?
Because we have too many old white men. That's why.
There, we got lots of men there. Exactly. So we need to make it equitable in power and decision-making roles. We need to have equity there of men and women together, and we need to do everything possible to make that happen.
Great. Well, thank you. And that's great, because that leads into my last question. It's two parts, because now that you talked about that they're not going to actually do another huge conference, but I was wondering if we know yet what next year's CSW topic will be, and then, of course, 2020, I hope this is what they address, what we're talking about.
Well, yes, so no, they have not yet come up with a theme. It's unusual. I don't know why, because normally there are some discussions, but it's going to come out fairly soon because they don't linger too long on not having anything. So we will know about that fairly soon, and we'll have to wait and see what the theme's going to be. But it'll probably, of course, it's going to be a women's issue. And it's going to be some form of gender equity, economic equity, so on and so forth. Maybe anyway, it's going to be along those lines. So this year was particularly interesting because of the rural women, because rural women, just have absolutely no access and no representation at all. So this is pretty important for them. But yeah, so as soon as we know, we'll be publicizing it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, is there anyone else that has a question for Liz? Liz, I have a question for you. I'm curious as to what committees you've worked on in the CSW, or which ones that you have found the most interesting to you.
Well, first of all, my background is that I was a nurse that was, and I've lost my brain, and in high-risk obstetrics. I was a midwife. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
That was my first career. I was a midwife, so I was very much always been interested in health and well-being. I'm very much into holistic health and all of that. I'm also a businesswoman, and I have created a business from almost nothing and built it into a very big business. And so I've lived that business because it was in a male-dominated industry, which was roofing and construction. I used to sell my products to Home Depot and Lowe's and traveled all over the United States and Canada doing that and dealt with all males. So, when I finally retire, I'm going to write a book about all of that. But so those have been my areas, particularly of where I've worked. So, all my years, I'm a BPW member for 30 years. I've served at every level, from the local level to the district level to the state level to, the international vice president, president, and now back to national president. So I've served at every level. And as a UN rep, I have served as a UN rep and basically was involved mainly with the UN on the business side of the UN, which you all know that was created. We've talked about that, about Kofi Annan created the business side, and for some reason it's not even in my brain. I can't think of the word here, but because I'm just overwhelmed with work. But let me see if I can get it quickly up on my computer for you. So we've been partnered there for many, many years, and so for me, that was dealing within that segment with multinational corporations who then were working on all the pillars of the UN, which is human rights, environment, labor, and corruption. So those things are all very important to me, and I think that I spent my time on there. So the UN Global Compact is what it's called, is where all these multinational corporations are verified by the UN to come in and work on these human rights issues because they can, and they are represented around the world. So that's been my passion for a long time. I've worked on the Business Net Task Force for a long time. I've been on the ITC, which is the International Trade Center partnership, which we have with this organization. It's a UN body. It's part of the World Trade Organization based in Geneva. When I was the international president, I signed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with ITC, that we partnered with them. And every year we've put on a women's forum where our women vendors could go and present their products to multinational corporation buyers who are looking for women-owned businesses and need to do business. So we created this unbelievable platform for all these years. The first one was in Chongqing, China, where I was present, and that's where we first signed the agreement on that platform for action. I was in Chongqing, China when I got together with the then executive director of ITC, And we agreed on this partnership. We actually signed the document also in New York City. There's some flyers and some historical stuff about that in the archives. But since then, we've worked diligently on getting more women scaled up into the global economy and into the global supply chain. So business has always been my passion. Health is my passion. But I also believe truly in our organization. It's for me, when I first joined this organization, I couldn't believe how rich and beautiful it was and what it had accomplished. And so I have spent my time and energy these 30 years in really building on that with women and women helping women, and doing everything we can to support women on all levels. And that's our mission statement. And I really was part with Antoinette, the past international president Antoinette, who created our mission statement. That our mission statement is to develop the business, professional, and leadership potential of women on all levels. And we do that through education, advocacy, networking, skill building, mentoring, and economic empowerment programs and projects around the world. We created that mission statement and have tried to put forward to the organization that that is what we need to focus on and work on, because we're not a charity organization. We cannot be. We're not a Red Cross. We don't have the capacity to do that. We're also not a service organization. We're not Kiwanis. We're not Rotary. You know, we can only do what we can for women, and that is that we develop the business, professional, and leadership potential of women on all levels. And that, as being our mission statement, is what we have to live up to every day when we are in leadership roles in this organization. And so that means that, you know, we're not just a coffee clutch either. We're not here to get together and just have a chit-chat and have lunch together. We can do that on the other side. If you really want to make a difference as a woman in whatever you believe in, this is the platform for that. And you have the most incredible organization at your fingertips that could propel you in any way you want to make that happen. And we just need traction and buy-in from our members. We need commitment from our members, and we need and we can make a huge difference and change. So it's been varied. I mean, I've done speeches around the world on various topics. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Anyone else? We have about like 4 minutes to go. Anybody?
So maybe I'll just add a little bit here then, Susan, just to piggyback on what I've been saying, because, you know, I'm on a roll, and when I get on a roll,
go ahead.
I just keep going. So, you know, I think as an organization, this Leaders Summit that we're going to have in Orlando, and all of the Leaders Summits that we've already done. We just did a Leaders Summit in New York. It was the 10th anniversary. I actually instigated the Leaders Summit on my first. I was 3 months into my international presidency when we put on the first Leaders Summit in New York, and I was really honored that this was the 10th one. So it has become a core educational program for our organization internationally, and we should be doing more of that nationally as well. But we're building in a building mode now, and we need to get our resources and so on built up so to do that. But at the Leaders Summits, one of the things that we really focus on is the sustainability of BPW. So let's just talk about that for a minute while I have 2 or 3 minutes. So let me know when time's up, Sue. Just butt in, okay?
Okay.
But, you know, we have to look at the sustainability of our organization. So I know that we are all proud and passionate of the fact that we're part of this organization that's almost 100 years old. And Elena Madison Phillips was our founder. She was the visionary that put together first the National Federation here and then the International Federation 10 years later. So they're 10 years younger than we are. But here we are at kind of a crossroads, looking at this organization and saying, where are we going and what are we doing? Because there are shrinking memberships all over. Everybody complains that their memberships are growing. Most organizations have shrinking memberships. So what is it that's going to ensure that the sustainability of this organization can continue for another 100 years? Well, in my opinion, we start with a few basic things. Number one, we have to conform to the governance of the organization. This governance has been tried, tested, and is proven to work. When followed, everything works well. There's no favoritism. It's same rules as for everybody. So we have to live by our governance. And too many of our clubs don't even look at their constitutions. They don't even look at the national constitution and bylaws to see what it is, our governance. What are we supposed to be doing? Those things should be carried in every person who's in a leadership role should have a copy of her constitution and bylaws in her hands at any one time to review. And that's what I used constantly, even at international. It was my guide in everything I did. So that's the number one thing. Number two is that we don't take care of succession in our organization. We never are not mentoring and bringing, and first of all, we are not identifying leaders. We're not mentoring enough people. And at the last minute, we all turn around and say, who's going to be the next president? And that happens when? Last minute. And what happens then? You suddenly just choose somebody, and it just is a catastrophe because, you know, corporations who choose people for their boards go through an unbelievable process to find the right people to sit on those boards. And we just willy-nilly say that anybody who's live and it's got a heartbeat, okay, we'll take you and put you on the board. But we don't take care of our organization that way because that's where we've lost so much ground, because not every person has the same vision. Not every person has the same leadership qualities. And a lot of times it's self-serving. It's not just about the title. It's about the work. You don't just get the title of president so that you carry it and be empowered with it. You get that title because you are willing to roll up your sleeves and lead, and that takes a lot of work. And so, you know, I feel so strongly about that's what we absolutely need to focus on in our clubs and in our federations and so on, to make sure that we have this organization sustainable. So that we do quality meetings, so that our members want to come to a meeting, so that we're not looking around and have 5 people show up. Why? Because they don't feel the value. If they don't feel the value, they're not going to come. So it's really each and one of us responsibility as leaders to make sure that we're making that happen for the sake of our organization, if we all care about it. So I'm sure that's my totally off the topic of CSW62, but there it is.
That was great. I want to stand up and clap.
Actually, I do too. I would agree with that.
Very good. Yeah.
No, I'm good, and it's a good thing I kept the recording on, because I think it's something that needs to be said. It's something a lot of us in our organizations are dealing with right now. I know in Michigan, I'm just trying to deal with getting people to get motivated. Mm-hmm. So right. what you're saying, it's speaking. It's saying it.
Yep.
Yes.
Liz, save that for next weekend, okay?
Oh, it's going to be. I'm going to be putting it in my. It's already in the framework of my speeches for Arizona and for Michigan, and everywhere I go. Because and Marsha, I'm going to be with North Carolina. And you know,
Excellent.
we're in this building mode. And if we're in a building mode, what are we going to promise our members? Just to belong? Pay your membership and belong. Okay, what are we giving you in return? Where's the value?
Right.
And so, you know, for years, it's been my issue is where's the value? If people feel the value, they will gladly pay. And that's how I got a dues increase, by the way, at International. We hadn't had a dues increase for some 20 years. Wow. And during my presidency, I worked like crazy. I put in systems, processes. It just absolutely worked well. And that's why we got a dues increase at the International Congress. It was through myself and my finance director. We worked like the dickens, and we got it in. And that's because our members at that point felt the value, and they were willing to pay for it.
Right.
So, and we can do the same at our local levels and at our national level if they feel it there.
You're right. We have to make sure that we're offering them something, and you know, it's that old saying: you get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're about like 3 minutes over, but that's okay because I think what Liz needed to say needed to be said. And I'd like to thank Liz once again. Thank you so much, Madam President, for coming and being our speaker for tonight. It was really enjoyable. And for those of you listening, stay tuned. I believe we do have another webinar coming in May. And Carol, remember what that one was about?
I want to say ERA. Is that right?
I think it is. That's correct.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful.
Okay. So until then and until our May webinar, I wish you all good night and adieu, and keep on fighting.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.